Hi there, it's Butterfly, and this is part 2 of talking about boundaries this morning. So in the part 1, I basically talked about the 5 different types of boundaries that you might want to consider. And in this one, I'm still using references from a book that I really enjoy working with when I'm doing my journaling. And this is 101 Trauma-Informed Interventions by Linda Curran. Curran spelled C-U-R-R-A-N. You see the author up here. Okay, so she's talking about boundaries, and I really enjoy this book very much. It helps me a lot psychospiritually. I find that my spirit becomes influenced by my daily interactions with people, my spirit, my soul, myself, my sense of who I am. And I become a much stronger person when I realize that there are patterns in conversations, that there are patterns in behaviors. And so instead of always reacting to things that happen in conversation, things that happen with people, over years what I've learned is to identify those patterns and to be able to better deal with them when I recognize them. So one of those type of patterns are boundaries. So one of the things that Linda Curran talks about in working with boundaries is that the difference between healthy families and clinical families. And so this book is written from a perspective of it's a very clinical perspective. So when you see somebody coming in and they're talking about the relationships that they have, because that's essentially what will bring you into a therapist's office is the relationships you're having and the difficulties that you're having with them, right? Hi, Pooch. Yes. You're such a love. You're such a friend. What are they saying? So there's rigid boundaries. The clinical families that are coming in, you're not going to be seeing them in therapy if they're tremendously healthy sort of dynamics. But the rigid, would you stop? There's rigid boundaries and there's also blurred or unclear boundaries. The rigid boundaries are associated with people who are disengaged emotionally, sociologically, psychologically, disengaged from other people. That I was talking about a little bit without identifying it in the first part. The example in part 1 of this videos on boundaries, the example that I had given was where you have had so many challenging or traumatizing interactions without knowing how to express yourself and delineate boundaries for yourself, that you remove yourself emotionally from other people. And so that ends up being really, really a challenge. You end up having so many boundaries that you set up for yourself, and you just stop interacting with people altogether, and you put up a wall. You know that sort of that wall that we talk about? There's a wall there. There's a defense mechanism. That is also known as a rigid boundary. They're so rigid that they're not porous enough to allow good people in either. It protects you from everyone. So there's rigid. And then the other one is a diffuse or misaligned or kind of unclear boundaries where we become so enmeshed with each other as a family. We're in each other's drawers. We're in each other's private matters and telling them what to do kind of thing, or somebody's telling you what to do, or you get these triangles. That's where you get triangles, when there's a lot of enmeshment. Triangles is kind of like where you have, like, say, 3 people or 4 people or whatever. There's usually a triad where I have to do something because somebody else needs something, so I have to meet their needs through influencing, the first person and the second person. It just becomes a real lack of boundaries. Like, let's see if I can give an example of enmeshment where you would get a triangle. So Dad wants, the parents are separated in different homes and there's a child. Dad wants to have a non-access weekend for, with his daughter because they're going to a wedding. But yet will not, contact the mother to ask her to work schedules out like an adult. Instead of going directly from father to mother to work out details of the schedule, the father will involve the very young daughter or son and say, well, go and tell your mother that this is what is going to happen. And then it falls on the child to talk to the mother, and it falls onto the mother to talk to the child. And then it becomes really nasty for the child to put a child into that position. And really what you should have is two adults speaking to each other, right? So that would be an example of a triangle. That would be an example of enmeshment where you have a blurring of boundaries. The right way to be able to discuss is for the two parents to discuss things together, if not verbally, then at least by, computer, right? So that's an example of an unclear boundary. Today is the 27th of April. And so, at least at the time that I'm recording this, so we have a public example that I'm admiring so much. So I'm going to include it in this video, of establishing a boundary in a very healthy way, and I am so happy to see it. And that is with the marriage of Meghan and Harry. Right now, on 27th of April 2019, they're still expecting their first child. And I was so happy to hear a few weeks ago when the announcement was made that they were going to keep the birth of their child private. I just was so happy. I thought it's about time that people put some reason into that firm. I don't know. Well, I have some ideas as to how the expectation is that the media would be able to camp outside of a hospital waiting for a woman to give birth. Which one of us would want that for ourselves? If you've given birth, or you have seen somebody or known somebody who's given birth, if you've been taking part of the delivery of a child, there's a zillion reasons why, you would want to keep that a very private affair. There could be a natural, uncomplicated birth. There could be complications. There could be cesarean. There could be twins. There could be death. There could be all kinds of things that happen at a birth that really you don't need to have the public trauma of the media camped out expecting you to look like $1 million. It's not a fair expectation that we have collectively accepted. And I cannot just convey my gratitude, if that's the way I want to say it. I cannot express my admiration enough to this couple, Meghan and Mary, and Meghan and Harry, that they have decided to keep the matter private. I mean, you may know the minute it's born. You may know hours after it's born. You may know a month after it's born. They've not defined anything. And I think that is spot on and perfect. And at first, there was a lot of appreciation about that in the media. And now they're saying, oh, it was a bad move for publicly and in terms of popularity for Meghan to say that she wanted to keep the matter private. It was a bad move with the media. And I'm thinking, you know what? That's an exact example of what I'm talking about here today. Defining your boundaries, when you change the rules of how other people have been treating you, people might be upset. They might be angry. They may be discontent. They may say nasty things to you or about you. And you need to stand your ground and say, this is the way you need to treat me. This is the way that I define what is okay and what's not okay. These are my boundaries. These are my boundaries. And my God, saying at the birth of your child, you're going to announce it when you're ready. That is a really great example. She's a good role model. This couple is a good role model. It's a good example. And I hope that more people do that, because what's been going on is nonsense. Not to disrespect previous couples who decided to have a media around the birth of their child. If that's what they've chosen to do, if that's what they felt obligated to do, whatever. I'm just saying that I really admire the establishing of boundaries with this couple. It's a very good thing. Now let's see. So there's rigid and there's unclear, sort of blurred boundaries. So we've talked about that. Now we get into the journaling. How do I work about, defining my own boundaries? How do they provide an example in this book, or Linda does provide examples in this book that you can work through in your journal. And these are examples that you may want to write down and work through as questions for journaling. So it says this is a time for reflection. And now there's two kind of examples that I'm going to give here. The first one is, think of a parent or a caregiver and answer the following questions. So you may want to consider journaling the answers about one caregiver or one parent, and then perhaps there's another significant caregiver or parent as well. So after you've done the first one and you've worked through that, you may want to come back another day and do the emotional sort of journaling about that one to kind of see different perspectives. Now, in what way was your parent distant or withdrawn from you? That is the question. In what ways was your parent distant or withdrawn from you? So that is the question that you're going to ask yourself. And now, in order to completely purge that on paper, or however it is that you want to kind of consider that, meditate on it, or draw about it, or whatever it is you want to do to kind of work on that question, she says to include a certain number of themes. Include things like, consider an incident in which you ran to your parent with enthusiasm. I'm so excited about this thing that happened. And he or she turned away from you without following up on your excitement. That last part is kind of important, because let's say you're, frying something and your 7-year-old comes in and says, I really want to talk about this thing and show you what I did at school because I'm so happy about it. Right now I'm frying something. It's a dangerous thing. Can we do it later? And then you follow up. You do follow up on it later. Okay? So sometimes there's that. But this question is saying, consider that you were brushed aside, and it felt brushed aside permanently. There was no follow-up later on to say, you know that thing that you were excited about? I'm in a better space right now. I'm not upset anymore about the thing, my hard day at work or whatever. I'm in a better space right now. Okay, I'm not busy, and I'd like to be able to, can you tell me about that? I really want to hear about that. That is following up on it. So basically, this is, you're being dismissed. Okay, so you might also want to consider stuff like evidence of a distant parent emotionally is events that are missed. So you had a recital at school or something, sports, whatever, and that parent is constantly absent. That is a distant, kind of emotionally distant parent. Another thing that might happen is if for a child on a access time, if you're an access parent, or if you're a parent who has a 1 week on, 1 week off when they're with you, if you decide you have to stay in this house, or you have to stay in a house with somebody else where you're going to be bored out of your head, but you can't stay at the other parent's house during this weekend, or during this week, or during this time that you're supposed to be with me, but I am not going to be here in the house. I have to go out of the house, out of town, and do a thing. But you are, so that is really kind of creating a distance between you and this. It's kind of like an abandonment feeling. Broken promises. So a parent who will say, we're going to go to the movie next weekend, and not do it. There may be some legitimate reasons for not going that one time when you said you would. There may be some legitimate reasons. Well, I think as children, when you pick up on those things, like, oh my God, we were supposed to go on this trip sometime this summer, and the whole summer went by and we didn't go. There may be legitimate reasons, there may be some health concerns, but still, as a child, or as when you're looking at your caregivers, that's a broken promise that stays in your mind. Evidence that your preferences were unknown. They don't even know who you are, what you like. Evidence that your thoughts were not understood. So if your parent is not connecting with you, if I felt that a lot when I was growing up, for sure. I felt that a lot of my thoughts were not understood. And what I really realized is that some of the people, like, I'm not going to be naming people or whatever, and whoever you might think it is probably not the right person, but I know that there were people who had access to me as a young person, and who were very narcissistic, who did not understand how to connect to the child, me as a child. No matter what I did, it was always incorrect. Now, there's dynamics about narcissism for sure, and those are available online. I've actually even I've given links like to Les Carter, Dr. Les Carter, Carter. He has a channel called Surviving Narcissism, I think. Anyways, the narcissist is in his channel title, and I really like listening to him. He gives small, short blurbs, 10 or 20 minutes, and he's a psychologist, and he just talks about dealing with the narcissist and identifying those behaviors and how to deal with them. I really like Dr. Les Carter. Spot on. So that was a tangent. I don't even know what I'm talking. Yeah, so as a child, I did not feel that my thoughts were being understood. Still to this day, there's certain people who I can talk to who I know that if I say, I think, blah, 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 or I feel, blah, 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 the response will be either to cut me off mid-sentence, if I can make it to the middle of my sentence, or the expectation that I would have had. I've long since let go of those expectations, but when you reflect back to somebody when they speak, I never got that. I never got that validation. So if somebody says, do you know what, this thing happened, and whatever, I bought a pair of jeans and I'm so excited, whatever, anything. When you reflect back to them, like, oh, tell me about these jeans, or really? Go put them on. Let me see them on you. I want to see how good they look. Or really, just the kind of I heard you kind of response. Don't expect it from somebody who's very narcissistic, because it's just not going to happen. So you see how I, as a young person, really felt unvalued, not valued, because there's no validation, right? So it took me a whole lot of years and a little bit of white hair to understand that when you're dealing with people who cannot appreciate that, stop beating yourself up and stop feeling inadequate. Stop feeling like a second-rate citizen, because you are not. You may just be surrounded by people who are not, they don't have the tools to give you that validation. They don't have the communication skills. They don't qualify. They're just, either they're narcissists, or they just don't have it in their mind to be able to have a healthy conversation with you. So stop feeling inadequate and start looking elsewhere for people who can be a friend and an equal and not so dismissive. right? Because your self-esteem really matters. I mean, how can you define self-esteem? It's how you feel about yourself. Who decides how you feel about yourself? You do. So you need to make those choices to feel differently, and you need to know that maybe you're not all wrong all the time. Maybe you're surrounded by people who are not respecting healthy boundaries, and you are not defining your boundaries because perhaps you haven't learned how. Okay, so let's continue learning how. So as you're journaling about this question, think about an incident in which you ran to your parent with enthusiasm and he or she turned you away without following up on the excitement. We're continuing with that. Also, you want to consider evidence that your interests were missed or being passed over when something concerned the whole family. So if you were like conveniently excluded from plans or information that other people were informed about, that is evidence of distancing yourself in an unhealthy way. Okay, so that was the first example. That was the first exercise. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a part 3, and I'm going to go through the second exercise because this one's already at 21 minutes. So I hope this is helping you. And take care. Have a great day. Happy journaling.